All right. Before you say, dude, this guy is nuts, how are you gonna compare a Tarmac and an Epic Evo? Well, hear me out. If you've caught the bug of cycling, you know that that excitement carries over into other disciplines of the sport. And so sometimes if you've got one bike, you might be considering a second bike or maybe even a third bike. Or what if you've got 3 bikes and you're trying to consolidate that quiver down to 2 bikes or maybe even just one single bike? That's what we're gonna talk about today. You see, the dynamic changes as you go from 3 bikes down to 2 bikes. And that beloved Crux that I have, well, that bike actually might be the first one to go. As always, I share my perspective as a pretty normal dude. I ride around 7,500 miles a year, although I did just hit 8,000 miles for the year. I hold down a normal 9 to 5. I enter the occasional contest and I don't get paid to ride a bike. But man, I love to smash the pedals with friends in between work, life, and family obligations. And this video isn't sponsored. In fact, none of the videos that I've done so far are sponsored. I should add that this comparison isn't specific to just the Tarmac, the Crux, and the Epic. I mean, you take road, gravel, and mountain bike, and you could insert whatever favorite brand or bike you have in those 3 categories of bikes. If I can pick 3 bikes, I choose the 3 that I have today. On one end of the spectrum, I have the Tarmac. On the other end, I have the Epic Evo. And right in the middle, I have the Crux. On the road side, you know how much I love the Tarmac. That's the best road bike that I've ever ridden. In fact, on Saturday, I pulled it out of the garage for the first time in about 3 weeks, and I was just astounded at how fast and efficient that bike is. It's just a total blast. The same could be said about the Crux. That thing is kind of a gravel killing machine, especially if you favor light gravel. It's fast, it's nimble, it climbs really well, and I think it's really, really stable. That's gotta be my favorite gravel bike of all time. And then you have the Epic Evo, which is probably the perfect mountain bike for my style of riding. So I don't ride anything that's too technical, too aggressive, and the Epic Evo rips uphill as well as downhill, and it's fast, and it just feels really, really stable and really comfortable. In fact, of all the people who I asked about the Epic Evo, I've never heard one person say anything bad about it. Now, if I can only choose 2 bikes, well, here's where things get interesting. See, my beloved Crux would be, unfortunately, the first one to go, considering it lies right in the middle between the Tarmac and the Epic Evo. And that's not necessarily a knock on the Crux, it's just that with the Epic Evo, you have the ability to truly lock out the suspension. And so if you were to go a step further and inflate the tires just a little bit more, well, now your on-road ride experience is much, much better. And so you can get to the gravel or the dirt or the mountain bike trail a little bit faster than you normally would. And you can do all that without sacrificing the ability to tackle light technical terrain. And so you get kind of the best of both worlds. It's pretty fast on light and regular gravel, and you have the ability to go and explore other trails. And now when it comes to the Tarmac, I suppose if I wanted to kind of bring that into the middle of the spectrum, I could throw 32mm file tread tires on there and do a handful of gravel trails, although it wouldn't be my first preference. And I guess this is where the Enve Melee comes in to kind of bridge that gap even further, is now you've got a bike with 35mm tire clearance, and so that opens up quite a few options if you are considering that. In other words, you have the Tarmac on one end of the spectrum and the Epic Evo on the other, and if you do a few simple modifications, you can kind of bridge that gap into the middle, filling most of the void that is left by the absence of the Crux. And if I had to choose just one, well, you probably already know the answer. It's the Crux, of course, and I would probably get 2 wheel sets. One that had a set of gravel or wider tires on it, and another wheel set that was set up for road, so I could just swap interchangeably between the 2 with maybe a 1036 cassette. And with a 4835 or a 4633 chainring, I feel like you could cover a good portion of the spectrum, except for kind of the extremes on each end. And if I had to choose one single setup, it would be the Crux with a set of Enve 4.5s and a set of the Pathfinder Pros in 38mm. See, I think with that setup, you could inflate the tires when you wanted to ride road, and you could air down when you wanted to ride gravel, and you could cover just about everything with that one single setup. That would be awesome. As I look back on my year and I look at all of the riding that I've done, this is kind of a fun exercise to ask myself, look, if I have these 3 bikes and I could eliminate 1 or 2 of them, what would I do? And I'm curious, what are your thoughts? What would you eliminate or what would you change about this scenario? Or which bikes would you supplement for the Crux, the Tarmac, and the Epic? Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. Next week, we're gonna jump back over to some van stuff, and we're gonna talk about what I wish I had known before the build out of our van, and then we'll dabble in a little bit more of cycling and some off-season chatter. Anyways, until next time.